Good evening, everybody on the East Coast. Good afternoon to our friends on the West Coast, and good in-between time to our friends in the in-between spaces, which, again, we all seem to find ourselves more and more these days. So welcome, everybody, to the Social Justice Power Hour, brought to you by the Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice, of which I am proud to call myself the chief activist. My name is Robert Sayers-Schreiber, and I am so glad and thrilled and honored, as always, to have you all with us. And thank you for that. It means a great deal to us that you join us for these power hours. We've done over 100, and it's been an incredible experience. And it's an incredible experience because of the community that we've been able to bring together, but it's also an incredible experience because of the guests we've been able to have come to this community. And that is especially true tonight of our guest, Anoa Changa, who is an electoral justice reporter for our Prism. And we'll talk to her in a few minutes. And I'm very excited about this conversation because this is a subject that is so important. And it's a subject that I will freely admit I am not as knowledgeable about as I should be. So I look to learn with you, my friends, about how, one, this impacts our elections, and two, how we can help impact our elections by knowing how we can participate best as possible. So I'm very excited to bring Anoa on in a few minutes, but of course, a few things to talk about at the top of the show. First and foremost, the shirt you see me wearing is a wonderful shirt. It says, "Prisons do not disappear social problems, they disappear human beings." And of course, that's a quote from the incredible Angela Davis. This is the back of this shirt. And I am sharing this not just because it's a wonderful piece of fashion, which it is, but it's made by this great company called Forgive Everyone Collective. And the Forgive Everyone Collective, they sell shirts that inspire people to forgive others. 20% of their proceeds are donated to help individuals who have been imprisoned successfully reintegrate back into society. So far, they've raised over $8,000 and going and going and going. The rest of the proceeds fund their activism and political education work in the form of storytelling, resource guides, and online blog. They believe justice and accountability should include investment in growth, transformation, and restoration. Simply enough, they believe in second chances. So please support this wonderful company that make great shirts and do incredibly wonderful things for folks. And we have a great rest of the week coming up. Tomorrow night, we welcome back an old friend, Amazin Latte, who is a wonderful transgender bodybuilder, athlete, works with Athlete Ally, works with Stonewall UK, a great activist, a great advocate, and a great friend to the center and a great friend to our shared community. So we look forward to that conversation tomorrow night. Friday, we welcome back our Open and Out Mic Night, hosted by Haley, who is a great hostess with the mostest. This is for our LGBTQI plus community and our allies and friends to bring to the virtual stage your energy, your talent, and your spirit, and hopefully a combination thereof. And then next week, we keep bringing the fire. We're going to start with the wonderful author, Kiese Lehman, who did the incredible book Heavy. We look forward to a conversation with them. So excited about that. And then right after that, we're going to bring to you Sydney Ballou, who is a transgender boxer and also a ballroom expert. And we're looking forward to having a tremendous conversation about their journey. And then we're going to have Justin Sayer, a wonderful actor, writer, director, and I'll throw a name at you, worked on the show Two Broke Girls, but did amazing other work too, and looking forward to talking about their work. And then we're going to end the week next week with a drag performance by Newark's very own Alicia Day. We're going to have conversation. We're going to have talk about drag as a culture, as an art, and performance as well. It's going to be a fabulous night, and that's a week from this Friday. So please join us for all of that and much more. We have a couple of wonderful surprises coming up. Things we're solidifying right now, but we're going to have an incredible end of summer, back to school, early fall lineup. We have some incredible folks coming at you. But speaking of incredible folks, I want to welcome to our virtual platform Anoa Changa, who is a staff reporter leads Prism's coverage of electoral justice and voting rights. Her passion lies in building collaborative political spaces that fundamentally change the way communities and grassroots organizations engage with the social and political systems around them. She was an attorney. Now she has hosted the podcast, The Way with Anoa, tackling politics and current events through a Black progressive feminist perspective. And if that doesn't excite you, I don't know what will. So let's please welcome our guest tonight, Anoa Changa. Anoa, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting. I am really honored and happy to be here. And I love the ability to chop it up with y'all about electoral justice, about voting rights, and what's at stake in our elections, not just now in 2020, but just going forward.
Well, we really appreciate it. And, you know, as I said, we were talking in the quote unquote green room before the show. And this is a subject that I myself personally and professionally also don't know enough about. So I've been very excited about having this conversation with you for weeks now, ever since we first connected through a mutual friend, right? A mutual friend introduced us. And it's always wonderful when folks in the community can connect other folks in the community.
Mm-hmm.
So, tell us about, first and foremost, the platform you work for is Our Prism. Let's start there.
So, well, it's Prism. Our website's Our Prism, but Prism is a no problem.
I know nothing.
No. I mean, it throws everybody off because that's the website name. But when you have something that's a cool metaphor, but also something that's a very common usage, it's kind of hard when you got to start trying to claim your domain space and things of that nature. But like the idea is that like Prism is like shifting the narratives, changing the lens through which we view our world, our politics, and society all around us, right? So hence the name Prism. And one of the things, I mean, it's a nonprofit outlet that is grounded in a basic just theology, so to speak, or just viewpoint of centering people who are closest to the problems and the issues, as well as really highlighting the work, the experiences of folks who are a part of the new American majority, the rising majority, looking at Black, Indigenous, POC communities, as well as those who are traditionally underrepresented, whether it's folks in Appalachia, working class folks, working poor, who aren't really centered in media in a way that is positive, uplifting, and showing them a way or alternative way than what we get from most mainstream narratives. So that's in a nutshell. I had the pleasure and honor of coming on staff with Prism back in December of 2019 as their first full-time staff reporter in electoral justice. And we have 3 other staff reporters. One is general news reporter, Carolyn. We have our senior staff reporter, Tina Vasquez, who covers gender justice and workers' rights. And then we also have our criminal justice staff reporter. We are a predominantly woman of color outlet. Our entire editorial primary team is, editors and staff reporters are all women of color. And then we also have an amazing man named Vicente. And I'm blanking on Vicente's last name. Please forgive me, Vicente. But Vicente is our digital manager and is just absolutely phenomenal in helping us get all the things together that we need to across our social media and engaging our growing audience. So that's just a little bit about Prism. Definitely check us out because we have amazing coverage from my colleagues and I about a whole host of issues, including just thinking about like just the pandemic alone. Tina did some really deep reporting around workers' issues at the intersection of gender justice and immigration, around folks who work in meat processing and poultry packing plants, who are also undocumented. So there's just like really cool stuff that's going on all the time. And I'm really excited that I get to be a part of a team that's digging in on issues that aren't necessarily seen through this vantage point across most major outlets.
Yeah, the work you're doing, the work Prism is doing as a whole is so important. And especially Tina Vasquez, I've been reading her stuff, and she's someone we'll have to have on too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. But you have such a distinctive voice, and I want to ask this up front because it strikes me so wonderfully that your reporting is so very strong and informative and to the point. And then on social media, you allow yourself a little more, shall we say, freedom. I'm wondering if how much of that is I don't want to say the word isn't calculated, but thought thoroughly about. Because do you ever worry that by being so expressive on Twitter and other platforms, do you ever worry that'll take away from the voice that you have to express these larger issues, as it were?
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate that question. And it's something that we really talked about a lot when I was first coming on staff to Prism. Part of why I was like brought on staff as the electoral justice staff reporter and have been able to be in some of these spaces, having some of these conversations, is because of the perspective and the voice that I have crafted, curated, particularly more so on Twitter. If you do follow me on Facebook and Twitter, you'll notice it's a little different between the two platforms for sure. I'm definitely sharper and edgier, I think, on Twitter. But part of what we've been talking about, and something that I've been learning more the more I dig in, and just looking at the work of folks like Scalawag Magazine, which covers Southern reporting here across the South, as well as the Freedom Ways Network that has a host of amazing movement journalists, and really just thinking about what is authentic for me instead of trying to fit into this mold of what is traditionally thought of as being objective or journalism. Often is deeply ingrained through a lens of whiteness and white supremacy culture that says that we have to think, talk, and act about issues in a particular way, that often is to the detriment of, the communities that I seek to serve through my coverage. So if folks so I've been going back and forth whether or not I should even like clean up my social media, like older posts. But being a lawyer and through the work I used to do before I shifted into movement work, organizing work full time, I was always trying to be careful anyway about what I put publicly out on social media. So I don't think that anything I do goes like too far over anyone's lines, but it's definitely something that we talked about and thinking about how to navigate and have certain conversations. But also, I mean, there is a real clarity in building trust and perspective. And my outlet gives me, the trust in other people that I'm starting to work with across other outlets that I've before in the past and continue to have relationships with, also value the way in which I'm able to kind of cut through the noise, and define for myself on my terms. It's like journalistic self-determination in a way, to define for myself what I believe is a good way to be discussing some of the issues of today, as well as really making sure that perspectives are being put on the table that are usually glossed over, or in some ways even mentioned or denigrated as being unacceptable for this field. And I also just like think about kind of like with the uprisings, we've seen like this shakeup in journalism to an extent. We've seen like Wesley Lowery and other people really take on this notion of objectivity and the lens through which journalists are traditionally socialized in their coverage. And so I do try to balance, and I do try to, like, y'all don't actually realize how much, if you do follow me on social media, I really do actually think about a lot, and I delete and rewrite a lot of things before you get the final version, because I'm trying to balance and really be thoughtful about not just like how I'm presenting myself, because I always show up as my true authentic self regardless, but like what is the best way to get the message across. And sometimes it's a miss and we learn, and sometimes it's right on the money. And so it's an evolution and a process, and I'm really thankful for other colleagues I have to be able to check in with them as well about some of these things. As someone who didn't come from a traditional journalism background, as you noted, I'm a lawyer by trade, organizer at heart, and journalism is something that I have found joy in as well. And I see it as another way of extending my contribution to the work that is going on in terms of protecting and shifting our democracy towards a more just lane.
Well, I mean, I have to say, totally unbiased. Your tweets are just fire. I mean, I look forward to whenever I see something pop up. I'm like, it's going to be good. But what I love about it is it's 100% platformed in knowledge that nobody can call you on not knowing what you're talking about, and you can throw as much shade as you need to because you can always back it up. But I like this quote, if I may, and I always hesitate to quote people back to themselves, but I think it's so apropos to what we're talking about. You said, quote, "I'm not going to be silenced because of fear. People need to understand the nature of social media, but also how little access Black people have to traditional forms of media before admonishing me for participating in a platform that is respectful of my insight and voice." When I read that, I thought, every single thing I read on Twitter from you speaks to that. So the thoughtfulness is there. It's tremendously apparent. I'm going to ask you this: just what's a tweet that you did not post? Is there something you can share with us that you thought about and you said, you know what, this one I can't do? Is there something you can throw to our viewers that?
I think since coming on staff full time as a journalist and really understanding the importance of about having independence and or what is the appearance of independence, not that I've never been independent in anything that I've ever done, but just in how like potential readers or supporters could take some things, right? Like just thinking about that type of thing in consideration. I mean, I think that I have like softened in the past 8 months to an extent in terms of like how I have really engaged around specific candidates and how they are engaging. And sorry, there's like echoing my kids. It's the downside of everyone being quarantined at home. There's echoing from upstairs. I apologize for downstairs to the children. But I mean, I think that there are some tweets maybe about even like I have one tweet recently about my thoughts on the vice presidential selection committee process for Democratic nominee Joe Biden. So I've really kind of shaped how I've thought about things, and I've just taken my time to just figure out what I want to comment on, because not everything requires me to comment on. But I probably would have had sharper criticism or public criticism of just during when it was still a more robust primary back in like February, March, I think, of some of the candidates. And so maybe that's like something that I wouldn't have tweeted, or I started to tweet, or I caught myself. More so, again, it's been primarily because thinking about just like being able to be considered a valid news source, a voice for people to turn to, and being taken seriously as a journalist. So balancing that with my own inclination to just call it like I see it. So it's really been a balancing act. But like that quote you read from me, just to let people know who if you Google me, it's still really bothersome that when you Google me, one of the first things, I don't know if it's still the first thing, but one of the first things you'll see is a news story done by our local PR affiliate that was pitched to me as, we want to talk to you as someone who does independent media and activism, but in turn it ended up being an attack piece basically about how I was basically a Russian stooge for going on a show called By Any Means Necessary that was hosted by a really close colleague of mine, Eugene Puryear, which was aired on Radio Sputnik. And there were a whole host of issues and a whole bunch of things that went around. And so I understand and have clearly understood since the last election cycle the concerns folks have had around, Russian interference and disinformation. It's something I've talked about with colleagues and folks and been very clear that, yes, investigations and stuff need to happen. And I have also very, very clear about why I was willing to do Eugene's show. There's one other show on that network that I also did called Loud and Clear. And on that show, I actually had one of my favorite debates. I debated a vice president from the Heritage Foundation about the non-existent voter fraud. And it was a great 20 minutes that gave me joy. But I was very clear that I'm very selective about who I talk to on platforms and things of that nature. Not because I think I'm like, so good or whatever, but I do think about like my credibility and my brand. And I am completely confident in Eugene's ability to, control the spaces that he organized in terms of media, and was actually honored to have those conversations that I had on their program. And so that whole process led to this whole big blow up locally for me at a time where I was running a small progressive blog and making noise about, our governor's race in 2018 in our primary when Stacey Abrams was running against Stacey Evans. And there was this real slant from our local media. And so that was seen by some people as an attempt to kind of silence me or discredit me. And it actually had a reverse effect. And I had a lot of outpouring of support across the board from a lot of people who did point to, like, you guys are making her point by running this story. It was later repackaged 2 months later by NPR's Morning Edition without ever clarifying or checking with me, further making my point, or addressing any of the issues or controversy that came up from the initial interview in the way it was presented and the conversations I had with that reporter. And so, like, overall, like, I have really valued being able to be in a space where I can help create and tell the stories of people who are doing the work, who are people close to the issues. I have been able to be in space and share, break bread, so to speak, with tons of people who are doing voting rights work. And I'm not originally from the South, but having lived in Georgia now for 6 years and really seeing in real time, including ballot chasing after the 2018 election in the rain. And for those who are not clear, ballot chasing is literally chasing down ballots. There was such an overusage of provisional ballots in the 2018 election here. There was a massive process to actually identify people who had used provisional ballots to make sure they actually understood how to cure to make sure their votes counted. And it's a mishmash. There is no continuity across the 159 counties in the state. So we were literally decoding handwritten documents from different county boards of elections that had different systems of coding people and their issues. And we were then trying to match up to the best of our ability that information with the information in the voter rolls to make sure that we could actually find and identify the people. So we were, once folks cleaned up that data, then we were all out knocking doors. And I remember me and my extremely broken Spanish and Google Translator doing some door knocking of Spanish speaking voters. And I'm sure they were like, oh my God, who is this talking to me? They probably got the wrong impression because my Spanish was so bad. But this brings me to another point. It is super important and super critical when we are doing this work that we have people from communities that we're building and empowering who can actually speak and engage with folks in language. We saw this here. We had folks organizing in Spanish. We had folks organizing in Vietnamese and several other Asian languages. Like, it is so crucial. So when I am willing to take a platform, and again, it's selective for me about what I'm willing to talk about and who I'm willing to talk to, it is in the furtherance of making sure that our democracy is serving the people that have unfortunately not been served, contrary to the really great language that exists in the Constitution, all the subsequent documents and court litigation, etc.
This is wonderful. There's so many threads in what you just said. I feel like we need 3 hours. I feel like we need a power 3 hours. And so I'm going to try to be as expeditious as possible, but there's so much I want to know. I want to definitely get to your personal journey, and we'll do that in a few minutes. Mm-hmm. But I want to talk about the important work you're doing. But I'm fascinated by the line that's drawn between journalism and activism. And if there is one, or there should be one. Now, we have a press corps in the White House that has continuously disappointed us by not asking any questions of substance. And they're the only ones that have an opportunity to do so and don't. And it's so infuriating. And I'm so glad you brought up your tweets today about Vice President. I thought they were so spot on, but I also had this moment where I was like, gosh, this really seems like there's so much passion behind this. And I loved hearing your thought process about it, knowing that it was definitely thoughtfully done. And that's why the work you're doing is so important, both personally when you engage in that kind of conversation on social media, but then on Prism as well, when you're able to dig deeper into an issue. So what can we do? What can the public do? What can people who want to be involved in making sure that the upcoming election is as fair as possible, that every vote is counted, every voice is heard. This is a huge question, I know, and this is another hour in and of itself, right? I apologize, but I really want to start as large as possible, as exponential as possible, and then we can drill down to the smaller, focus things. But how do we really do the work that needs to be done?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think the first part I'll say about like some of my critiques, right? Like folks may see my critiques of Democrats, and there's this thing about how we shouldn't eat our own, or we shouldn't, we just got to get those people elected. And the problem with that line of thinking, particularly when you come from particular communities and backgrounds, whether it's people of color, whether it's LGBTQIA or queer POC communities, disabled communities, like regardless of folks who have been left out of the process, right? Just waiting to people get in and then pushing them, it mostly does not work. It very rarely does it work to our benefit and value, right? And so something that I've been struggling to figure out and talking with lots of people who are more brilliant than I am, to think through about how do we build accountability into our process. And I think that we get so caught up in worrying about whether or not we're giving the other side, so to speak, ammunition, that we don't actually take the time to clean up our own house. Like in our own interpersonal relationships and communities, we rarely will tolerate the type of behavior that we allow to happen politically just because people say they're our friends or are on our own side, right? Like we would repair and make sure relationships were working for us and not just being draining. And so I really do think that there is space to build accountability into these processes, even when we're supporting people, right? Because otherwise they're just we know this from our own personal lives. If we don't demand better people, they're just gonna do whatever, right? But I will say that it is super important. Like we were discussing before the show started, right now, a huge demand, which is something that even like young folks, as young in some places as 16, can get involved in, is poll workers. While there is a major push for vote by mail, or as in some places, it's absentee ballot use. Most of the country relies on absentee ballot use as the alternative to voting in-person voting. Overwhelmingly, most of the country, I think it's like 6 maybe states now, or I think Nevada makes 7 states that have some process for vote by mail. The difference, I'll explain really quickly. The difference, and it matters that there's a difference between a vote by mail system where registered voters are just sent their ballot and that's how they vote, versus when you have an absentee ballot process. So you have to go get the application. You either have to get it from an actual election board office or board of registrars or whatever your election authority is locally. You then have to fill it out and submit it. So either you have to get it from them in person and submit it in person, or you have to download it from the internet if it's available and then get it mailed in and then wait for them to process it and then wait for them to send you your ballot and then return that, right? Those are so many extra steps. And at a time where the mail system is so vulnerable, it's really crucial that we have folks who are working with their local municipalities and county elected officials. If you can just automatically skip that first request step and just send out the application ballots to people, the applications to people for absentee ballots, that is something that we saw done in the Ohio, Georgia, primaries. I think West Virginia did it as well. But another thing but not everyone can do the vote by mail. And if you are going to vote by mail, you are going to request absentee ballot. If you have drop boxes in your community, make sure you use the drop box. Make sure you know all the specific rules. So if you have to have signatures in a certain place, if you have to get notaries, if there are organizations that are working around these issues, do they need help or support, right? I think those are ways, like initially, like you can always see like who might need volunteers. Do they need folks to make calls? Do they need folks to give staff maybe rides or support or whatever? And again, to the extent that you can do so safely, because we are still in the middle of a pandemic. The other part of it, when I was talking about poll workers, in-person voting is still a necessity, even in places that have mail-in voting for various reasons, for accessibility issues. There are people who just aren't able to access a ballot by mail for various reasons. And so making sure, again, this is another part of the advocacy component, but making sure that have access to the information about early voting to help kind of alleviate some of the jam on election day. But being a poll worker is so crucial. I just finished writing an article about the organizing around youth poll workers and getting folks as young as 16 to volunteer to work the polls, because one of the reasons why we saw so many issues and so many long lines on election day during the primaries since this pandemic has happened is because over 50%, close to 60% of poll workers coming out of the 2018 election were over 60 years old. And as we know, with COVID-19, over 60, that is an age population that is considered to be like at the high risk. And so a lot of people, out of concern for their health, rightfully so, were like, no, we're not going to do this. And instead of preparing or having a way to like, we experienced the burden of a system that didn't have an alternative when the bulk of our poll workers said, no, we're not working. Instead, what we saw across multiple states were polling locations just shuttered or closed and consolidated. Here in Atlanta, we had polling locations consolidated as well as closed, and we saw lines upwards of 5-6 hours. You saw similar issues in parts of Texas, Milwaukee, etc. So, you know, having people volunteer as poll workers who can do so safely, and most folks are being provided with, everyone's being provided with PPE. That is like a national push across the country. But then also some places are paying hazard pay. Poll workers are a paid position. A lot of people don't know that. But also some people are being paid hazard pay just because of the increased risk of COVID-19. So if you are willing and able, there is like some great resources out there in terms of getting involved in terms of poll working. I think on their volunteers like election protection, you know, check to see who's doing that civic engagement, voting protection, voter rights work in your local area, right? In your state, in your county. Can you volunteer to be election protection? If you're an attorney, there might need support in that capacity as well. You can do poll watching, right? To make sure that counts, that issues, that things are being, you know, handled properly. Organizations like the ACLU, the Lawyers Committee, they have operations already year round that do this type of work. So those are just some ways. But I think another component is also being informed. And I know a lot of us think that we're really informed and we know what's going on. But like misinformation and disinformation are huge issues. And we see a lot of disinformation coming out of the president. And that's not even a partisan thing. That is a reality thing, right? Like, and we're seeing folks on all sides, you know, addressing this, whether it's the tweets last week about postponing the election, which is not, which is a disinformation tactic. There are a lot of things that can be done to disrupt our democracy, and honestly, has been disrupting our democracy. You know, postponing the election is not one of them. However, there are other power grabs and other things. So like when we're talking about what is wrong and what's going on, we need to be very clearly naming the harms and also very clearly connecting the information, the people who are working to address these issues, so that we don't contribute inadvertently to the panic, right? We saw folks sit out in 2016, not because they didn't care per se, but just like for a lot of folks, the conditions that they live in, their lives have not fundamentally changed regardless of who is sitting in the White House. And unfortunately for some people, that was the same thought. Now we are seeing a very interesting scenario right now. And I don't mean interesting lightly. I mean interesting because I'm really at a loss for a better word at the moment. Where we really do have, you know, someone leading the country that is a sharp divergence in many ways from past administrations. There's a lot of criticism and critique about about America, about so-called democracy and empire. But what we're seeing right now with the handling of this pandemic, with really so many of the fault lines being exposed bare in terms of how families and communities have been left out of the so-called American dream. I mean, with the expiration of protections around eviction moratoriums, the expiration and refusal to extend the additional unemployment insurance, unemployment support for people. I mean, the conversation or lack around healthcare, the fact that this administration is continuing to try to undo the ACA without an actual replacement. And I know the ACA has its issues, but we can't just replace something that is like okay and have nothing in its place, because getting rid of the ACA would negatively impact most of us. A lot of us have pre-existing conditions, and that would, whatever protections that prevent our insurance from booting us, those would be gone. Like the protections that allow youth to stay on their parents' insurance if they're blessed to have it up until 26, that would be gone. So there's like so many different things happening right now. The attacks on, social justice folks who are in the streets demanding, justice and equity, and being targeted as criminals, right? Like that is a very blatant escalation, that is a departure in many ways from what we've seen in previous administrations as well. Yes, COINTELPRO and other things are a part of our history, and very much so. But what we're seeing is a very bold and blatant, use and misuse, arguably, of power, that was expanded post 9/11. So there are so many things at stake, and we need to be very clearly naming them for people when we're talking about why they need to vote, instead of just simply telling them to vote, instead of saying things like "don't boo vote" or people died for your vote. Like, for some folks, we need to be reflective and understanding where they're coming from right now, but we need to be talking to them in terms of how do we reduce the harms, and how do we organize for the good, right? Or equity, or however the framing is, and what does that strategically look like? Find the organizations that are doing this work. If no one is doing this work in your area, and you have the capacity or the spoons, as one of my friends would say, to take some of it on, see who's able to help you get some of these tools. Like, part of the upside of the pandemic is there are so many amazing organizations doing free trainings, like Working Families Party and Movement for Black Lives, and several other groups have been doing trainings and conversations. Acre. There's several groups that have been doing conversations around what does it mean to be pushing for defunding the police, for example. What does that look like? How do we start talking about budgets as moral documents? What are the very clear demands that we need to be making of elected officials at local areas that are very clear and concise, and not these bite-sized talking points that we keep hearing from folks who are completely against the idea. So the tools and the resources and the folks are out there. You just need to take the initiative to actually find them and start building that. I mean, organizations like Surge are doing like great solidarity work in some areas in terms of helping to move progressive white voters towards more action around racial justice and really getting people activated and involved. Like, there is like so much going on. It's almost information overload for me, but I really do feel like, being clear and informed and just seeing where we can fit in, but also give yourself grace that if you are overwhelmed, particularly in this pandemic moment, coupled with, what is happening socially and politically, and you are holding it together, and you are raising kids or caring for elderly parents or other family members, or working multiple jobs despite, what's going on. It's okay if you can't be out there full time doing all the things, right? Showing up, sharing good information, texting 5 friends and telling them to make sure they filled out the census, because that's another big thing that's happening right now. We have this administration limiting, like actually challenging the fair and free ability to fill out the census and get the best, most accurate count possible by reducing. There was an extension done. Things were postponed because of the pandemic, because normally by now the Census Bureau would have been doing field operation for what they call non-responsive households, and being able to go to people who have not already responded. And you can do the census on your phone, by phone. You can do it over the internet, or you can do it by mail if you still have the card that was sent, the information that was sent to you. Even if you don't have the invitation code, you could still go online, you can still call to do it, right? It's very simple. It takes less than 10 minutes. Many people fought to make sure things like the census, the citizenship question is not all of our people count, regardless of citizenship status. Like, when we're talking about what is coming out of the census, like why we need a fair and accurate count, we're talking about funding at multiple levels, federal, state, and local levels for different programs. We're talking about school funding. We're talking about community resources. We're talking about counting hospital beds, right? When we're looking at some of these areas where we have ER and hospital bed shortages because of the pandemic, we're seeing in real time. And I listened to a press call from the Census Bureau back in, I think, like March, and they were talking about how, like, literally they made this statement, like, we're seeing in real time the need for a fair and accurate count. because of the pandemic, right? We are seeing that this is an opportunity through the census, through census organizing. I had a piece that came out today about how census organizing is another way that our communities can build collective power and be heard. And it doesn't require your citizenship status. It doesn't require if you are able to vote. It's another way to be a part of the democratic process and make sure that our areas are getting the needed resources. And again, like, this count is for 10 years. It also affects congressional reapportionment. So filling out the census is like another crucial thing right now. If you have not already done it, and partly because of the delays, because like this administration has not kept up with prior census funding levels. So the census levels ramping up into this year of the census have not been funded at similar levels as in 2000 and 2010. So there have been like significant challenges, and yet there's still amazing organizations doing really good work across the country to make sure, in addition to the work done by the Census Bureau. I often feel sorry. I used to work for the federal government, so I often feel sorry for folks who are like nonpartisan folks who just simply work in these government agencies and have to get told what to do by whoever, you know, is in charge of the White House and whoever they put in charge, right? Because the census has like their staff. I don't really know about past years, so I never covered it before, but like I was going through a lot of materials, and they put a lot of time and thought into making sure that everyone knows they count. Right? Like, everybody counts. All of our kids count, all of our communities count. When we talk about hard to count populations, when we talk about our communities not having the resources and funds they need, this is part of that conversation. Like, this data gets extrapolated and thought about and figured out, and it's used for funding mechanisms like for the next 10 years. So like filling out the census, volunteering to be a poll worker if you're willing and so able to do so safely, you feel comfortable doing so, making sure we're sharing good information and being informed. I mean, literally, all you can do is make sure the people in your network are bought into the process and understand better about what it's at stake. That matters. And that's like, if you could tell, I remember Black Voters Matter back in 2018, we did a canvas when we did a Southern bus tour with them through Southern Georgia. And they had like these little palm cards, these little walk cards, and they were just like, you know, tell 5 friends, like, can you like agree to vote, and then tell 5 friends. And I thought that was so clever. It's so simple, right? I know some other folks have done that same thing via text messages or phone calls or whatever. It's so simple. Who's on your email list? Like, you know, it doesn't even have to be a partisan thing. If you want to get partisan and tell them who to vote for and tell them what's at stake, definitely do that, right? Know your people who you're talking to. But like that, having good information and sharing good information. Poll worker, if you can do it, or if there are young people in your life who can do it, encourage them to do so, because it's also a good pathway to civic engagement for younger folks, right? Like, we can start converting a whole generation of potential civic leaders and engaged folks through this process of training, of working at the polls. I mean, that's a part of democracy right there in action. And then if you can get involved around any election protection work and the local work with voting rights organizations in your area. I am blessed to be in Georgia, which has like organizations like Fair Fight, New Georgia Project, you know, Black Voters Matter. I mean, there are so many different groups that are doing so many amazing things. Asian Americans Advancing Justice is in LA, Chicago, Atlanta, and they're based in DC and do amazing work. There are tons of different organizations. There are affinity groups, there are, you know, general groups. I mean, there's so much there. And you always can just go get trained to figure out volunteering how to do that stuff on your own, right? Like dropping the voter registration link for your people and knowing the deadlines is important and valuable. So there are like so many different things we can do at multiple levels. It all matters. It all counts. And I mean, I just think we just need to figure out what resonates and what works with us. But at least if we're starting like in our own immediate circles and families and then branching out, that actually matters. Like I make sure my brothers and everyone has all the information. Like I had to remind my parents that we had a runoff election and that they need to make sure they got their absentee ballots in time. So these are things that we can be doing. Like every vote counts. Like we have local and state elections, but we have local elections happening somewhere in the country every single year. So that's the other thing I will add is making sure that you are paying as much, if not more, attention to state and local elections as you are to the presidential and what's happening in national politics, because the state and local stuff is what directly has an immediate impact on our actual lives. When we're looking at these school decisions around reopenings right now, these are state governments, these are local governments making these decisions for our kids and our families. right? When we're looking at these mask mandates in some areas, in some states, like my state of Georgia, you have a governor that is unwilling to make sure that we have the maximum protection for all Georgians, fighting with, our local leaders. So these are things that really need to be crucial. I mean, think about the different issues that you're concerned about. I just heard a really amazing young organizer, Gayla Tillman with the League of Conservation Voters, talk on a webinar earlier today about how important public service commissioners are. It might be called something different where you are, to understand the different smaller local positions, water reclamation districts, and things of that nature. These things are things that we often don't think about. They're not really that sexy, but they have an absolutely fundamental role in our day-to-day. Like public service commissioners, they directly impact our energy bills. I mean, they are responsible in terms of we have issues with energy and water shutoffs. I mean, all these issues. So it's a lot. There's a lot there. Pick in where you can get in where you fit in, but that's sharing good information. And can you get 5 friends? Can you get 10 friends? Can you get a challenge going, right? Have everybody in the family go get 5 people. I mean, those are types of ways that we get involved and engage. And so, like I can go on and on, as you can see, but I think those are some of the things that we can really start doing that are sharing that's sharing good information. I cannot stress that hard enough. We have a serious problem with domestic disinformation, and there's a difference between misinformation. So misinformation is erroneous information that is shared inadvertently. The person sharing it or people sharing it do not have the intention to misinform. They didn't know it was bad information. Disinformation is what we unfortunately see coming primarily from the Trump administration and others affiliated with them, where it's intentionally meant to misinform, to cause confusion, to outright, in some instances, lie about what is and isn't happening, particularly as it pertains to our political process. And we saw a lot of conversation about this post 2016 around Russian interference. There's interference from multiple, multinational entities, but we do have a serious problem domestically. I'm trying to think. I don't know if it was Time or the Atlantic. I think it might have been the Atlantic, maybe, that recently had a piece about the scourge of domestic disinformation. So understanding what's good information to even share when you're resharing stuff on Facebook, and just because it confirms like a belief you have doesn't mean that it's actually accurate and good. And that's something that we have to all sit with and challenge. So that's the other thing I implore people, like, do a gut check. Just real quickly, gut check. PEN America actually has some amazing guidelines around how to suss out, it's not just like fake news. It's like, really, is this like the accurate thing? Like figuring out whether or not I'm sharing good sources. We saw go viral just last week, the video with the doctors around coronavirus, the frontline doctors or whatever it was, holding that press conference that was from Breitbart that ended up getting pulled off of social media because it had a lot of blatantly false, inaccurate information, which is very dangerous in this time of global pandemic.
That was you just took us to school and to church at the same time. And I want to thank you for that. That's what we needed to hear. You gave us so many options to be of service, to make sure that our votes are counted, that our friends, our family, that our community's votes are counted. And I cannot thank you enough. That was exactly what I hoped you would do. And I'm so thrilled that you did it in such a wonderfully robust and meaningful way. I want to talk about, there's one piece I wanted to pull a thread out about language, because I think language is really important to you, both as a journalist and, as an activist. And I feel like it's so rare that we get to frame the conversation, that so often Republicans and right-wing folks will frame the conversation, will get use of language before we're able to co-opt it for, and it's not for our own purposes. You said that there's a difference between misinformation, disinformation. And it seems like they've even gotten to a point where if we challenge the president on simple facts, they make it sound like it's partisan. And how do we combat that? How do we fight back against, hey, you just told a lie? It's not a matter of you express an opinion I don't agree with, or I'm liberal and you're conservative, or I believe that people should be treated fairly and you don't, whatever it may be. But you just told an outright mistruth, or, disinformation, as you put it. How do we fight against that? How do we use language for our benefit?
I mean, I really think that's a really strong point, and that's why I really go to like the importance of there are some people that can actually be moved, right? In terms of their opinions and their thoughts. There are those people out there. I mean, when we look at the pool of independent voters, and I know on the West Coast, independent actually means something very different. And actually, in some of our states, independent voter actually means a different thing when it comes in terms of ballot access. So we need to be thinking about people who are considered themselves non-affiliated or unaffiliated, right? When we're looking to sway and move people. But I think that, I rarely spend time anymore arguing with people who are absolutely diametrically opposed or to what I'm saying, or who are absolutely grounded and invested in, digging in on false information after they've been corrected. Like, I think it's like, if you can find a good link or take a moment to take a second to like quickly fact check something. And again, recognizing that not everybody has that amount of time. Google, if you are more savvy, on your phone, doesn't necessarily always take that long, but just depends. And it's totally okay if it takes a little bit longer to search for something. Maybe you'll come back to it, maybe you don't. But I do think like it's really more important for the folks that we know are generally in agreement with us that we make sure they have good information. Because there are a lot of people who aren't necessarily as strongly in their opinions on particular issues, but they can possibly be swayed. Not saying that they will believe. So, like, for a prime example, right? I think there's a lot of overblown conversation around whether or not Kanye West will actually steal Black voters from voting, or steal Black voters from voting for the Democratic nominee. What is possibly likely, and what I've gone through with even like my own, folks that I know, is that there can be frustration about why, like, because of the way the conversation is happening and no one is taking the time to actually engage with them on the issues, on the process, on what's at stake, on like some of the other things that maybe Kanye has said and done politically that maybe they're not aware of why it matters to our communities. Like, I think the failure to really have those conversations instead of just stopping at freaking out because he's trying to get on ballots in Wisconsin and Ohio. I think, and not pointing to how there's also connections between like GOP operatives who were like in the process of getting Trump on the ballot, also not helping Kanye get on the ballot. Like, I think not clearly naming the harms, naming the things happening for folks, I think that does us more of a disservice than whether or not we can convince people who don't agree with us and believe in MAGA. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that our efforts are more spent trying to build out our coalition and get more people understanding about what's going on right now. So again, however, because I'm someone who will argue with folks too from time to time, I do think that making sure, and I will comment on posts sometimes too, because I think it's less important to be worried about, can I change this one person? But if somebody else ends up seeing these comments or skimming through, will I leave something behind that gives them another perspective or the right information, correct information? For example, the clearest example I can think of in terms of the Trump administration is all the rhetoric around voter fraud. In his campaign around voter fraud. There are so many articles that have absolutely debunked what he is saying. It's not that there is no possible, I mean, it's also possible that an asteroid can come and another one that rocked the dinosaurs can come rock the earth again and wipe us all out. That is possible. Whether or not it's likely to happen, the likelihood of it happening, how do we judge that is what we're looking at. And we're thinking about like the likelihood of massive voter fraud on the scale they're talking about. It's so infinitesimal. There is no documentation of what they are describing. And that's not to say that there have never been or aren't even currently cases being addressed. But at the same time, we need to really have this in context with the overall, agenda on the floor and really putting good information out there. Like, because of the false information they have been spreading, we have near about half the country, regardless of party, who's actually concerned about using vote by mail, and not even because of the issues with the postal service per se, but because of alleged security issues, right? Because of concerns around the election, because of the misinformation that he's spreading out there. And I think that is like one clear example of something that we might not be able to change his folks' opinions. I mean, maybe if we point to how recently, so like they're trying to sue Nevada over pushing for vote by mail. but he just also simultaneously said Florida is safe and secure, and so you need to vote by mail, use absentee ballots there. So like even pointing out that hypocrisy could actually, if you're trying to like make a point to people who are supportive of him, that hypocrisy and pointing out how he even messes up, that even could be a point if you are so inclined to do that type of labor. But I do think like we have a lot of our folks that we need to make sure have good information about the process, have good information about what's at stake. You know, there are so many young folks. Like I'm really excited because my daughter is turning 19 and we just went through our first election cycle together with this primary process, and it was a proud mama moment. But I'm thankful that my daughter had me there walking, actually with our entire family. Like our entire family had our first experience voting by absentee ballot, and all of us together were able to walk through how do we fill out this application properly so it's not rejected. How do we fill out the ballots are a little bit easier to fill out, but the application was a little confusing in a few parts. And again, a lawyer by trade, I still had to call someone I know who does voting rights work just to make sure we were signing in the right places. So making sure that folks have the assistance they need, legally permissible per your state, on how you can help and provide assistance in these processes. But also making sure that our folks have good information. Young people, like I said, young people in my life in particular, I'm making sure they understand that they can actually, achieve, access these processes and do things. My daughter and I was teasing my son this morning, but my daughter and I as well, we've all gone to the post office to make sure they understand how to mail letters, because we do have a generation now that has never really had to mail letters before. They've grown up completely digitally in many aspects. So just understanding these different, things. And I don't know if this is really like, I'm not going to say this is really like going to save democracy or anything, but there is a movement to make sure people are buying things from the post office, like stamps, other products, etc. Because the Postal Service is, in dire need of support right now. And the HEROES Act has passed the House, but it is pending in the Senate. There's been a lot of conversation about, the passage of John Lewis in this past week, 2 weeks. And one of the ways that folks could have argued that his legacy can be honored is passing the HEROES Act along with the VRAA, which has also been renamed after John Lewis. The Voting Rights Advancement Act, I believe it's called, has been named after John Lewis, and it is basically the replacement, the fix to undo the harm that was done with the gutting of the VRA after the 2013 Supreme Court decision in Shelby versus Holder. And so the HEROES Act would also provide for $3.6 billion for election administration funding across the board, and some voting rights provisions, as well as provide, I think it's $25 million. It might be more than that. Don't quote me. I could be mixing up my million and my billion, but I think it's $25 million for the United States Postal Service to help with their just issues around what has been happening post-pandemic. So there is a lot of information, and I know it's a lot. Maybe you have like, instead of a reading circle, maybe you have like a social share information circle, right? Like you and a group of friends, or you and your family, you all take an issue and just make sure you keep everybody up to date. Kind of like how back in the day when you had to do like a group project, everybody took a section and that's the section you read to put together your report. So, I mean, we got to be creative because, we are working hard. We are doing our best in the middle of pandemic and taking care of family and just really trying to survive when we really need to be pushing to thrive. And I just think that's how we spend our time and invest, even when we're talking about like what language and how we should be moving.
This is all so I can't believe how quickly this hour has passed. You are such a font of information, of inspiration. I really feel you've given our community an incredible direction to move forward, to know what to do. But I'm a little sad because I really want to talk about your personal journey as well. So I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to invite you back as we get closer to the election. Excellent. I'd love to have you back, talk about, because your story is incredible in and of itself. And I'd love to talk about that. And it's a truth. I never, I shoot myself in the foot by telling the truth more often than I compliment folks, but that's the truth. But I also would love you to come back closer to the election so you can give us, even more spot on advisement on how we can move forward as we get closer to that moment, because now we're 90 days out at this point. And as I said to someone today, I said, 90 days, given current state of affairs, seems like 90 minutes sometimes and seems like 90 years at some time. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much.
I cannot believe it's only August. And sometimes I'm like, oh my God, how is it August? Like, same thing. So I'm totally awesome and not totally awesome.
You are totally awesome.
Thank you. But I'm totally open and down to definitely come back and chop it up again. And I thank you so much for the invitation and opportunity to be here. And look forward to hopefully being able to catch one of your episodes. It's been late and hard pushing, but I'm so excited and thankful for the work that you're doing as well.
My pleasure. And I'll just give a little plug for ourselves here. All our episodes are on our Facebook page, so you can catch any one of them.
I'm going back, looking through the as I'm up working late tonight.
All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and your spirit and your energy and your knowledge. You've really dropped some wonderful things down tonight. We will pick them up and we will move and we will put our boots in the ground and make sure that we're doing the work. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Have a great night and best to your family.
Thank you. You too.
All right, be well. So that's Anoa Changa, everybody, electoral justice reporter at Prism, doing such incredibly important work and helping us also to figure out how we can help and be of service in doing that work ourselves. Please take her advisements tonight. I think that there was tremendous work that we can be doing. Go back. I know that there was a lot of drop there, and just go back to it. You can rewind the video, look at the parts that speak to you, look at the parts that you're able to do. We can only do so much, all of us, but we can do so much. So please do it. We are in the after party now. Prince be proud. We're after 8, so I'm going to say goodnight to our beloved community. I'm going to say please join us tomorrow night for Amazon Latte, who's a great transgender athlete. Please join us Friday for Open Out Mic Night. And please join us every weeknight. We are here to bring our community this empowerment, this edification, hopefully some enlightenment, and hopefully maybe even a bit of entertainment. We love you all, and we cannot thank you enough for your support. Have a great 22 hours and 55 minutes. We'll see you back here 7 o'clock tomorrow night, as we are here every night. Be well, be good, everybody. Take care of your families, take care of your community, and take care of yourselves. We love you all.